hiking your own hike is a good thing, no matter how you do it. But there was this wonderful gal, Anne, an Irish woman, who was working in drug addiction and alcoholism in Ireland, and just a very interesting person we leapfrogged with for quite a while. And she would just blast past us and kind of leave us in the dust. And we'd meet her at the next town. She'd be there. She'd already checked into her albergue and had her stuff together. Well, about midway through the Meseta, she started going slower. And we finally caught up to her at one point, and she was barely able to walk at that point. And this was her second attempt to do the Camino. It was a big deal. She'd taken off time. It was money. It was real important. She was a very religious Catholic, and she would go to every pilgrim mass that happened in the evenings. And she was a lovely, lovely person. And I just remember the last time I saw her, she was in tears, and she was flying home. I mean, she couldn't walk. So she was going too fast. When I saw her early on, I knew she was going too fast for her fitness level. So slow down. Take it easy, and try to build in extra time. If you've got more vacation than you are using, build it into your trip. We had planned on doing the hike and then going sightseeing in Spain. And when we started, we thought, you know what? Let's build the sightseeing into the walk. And we took 6 weeks, and that was great for a couple of older people that, and Katie had not done a long distance hike. And it was great to have that much time. So if you can, do that. But Anne, it was just really sad. And we saw a number of people leaving trail, not being able to compete. And it was always a very emotional thing. So that's why walking ahead of time, she hadn't done a whole lot of prep ahead of time in Ireland. Getting your feet, what happens to your feet, the whole issue of tenderfooted, and tender feet and tenderfoot, it's real. It's absolutely real. It doesn't matter what you're wearing. Your feet, if you're not walking a lot, are tender, and they will tend to blister. They'll tend to have all kinds of issues. Your cartilages and your different things. Oh, and also, your feet will swell as you walk. And just over the course of a day, when you start doing this regularly, Rob?
Yeah, I just wanted to say something about walking slowly. Our approach is to do each of these stages in 2 days.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we're very comfortable with that. It works for us at our age, and we avoid injuries, and we see things at a very slow pace.
Absolutely.
You don't have to do, you don't have to run, you don't have to follow Byerly's plan, and it works for us.
We broke many of his days up just that way. Absolutely. And some of them were real long, and we would just find a way to break them up. And it was so enjoyable. And also lightening your load. It's so nice to walk around with 8 or 10 pounds on your back as opposed to 20 or 30. It's very comfortable, actually. A day pack's worth makes for a nice day.
Scott, can you keep going on you were talking about swelling.
Okay, keep me on target.
Yeah.
What happens with your feet is that when you start walking every day for a full day, or 6 to 8 hours a day, your feet, after the first couple hours, start to swell. And if you do long trails, your feet will, it's not just a matter of the feet swelling, but your feet have 51% of your bones from your ankle down. They're the most sophisticated thing, keeping us upright. There's no other animal that stands upright and walks like we do. We are walking creatures, and if you read, actually, I should bring my box of goodies here. This book will tell you more about, even though it's about running, Born to Run, it will tell you more about walking than anything I've ever read. Born to Run is the Bible for most people walking long-distance trails nowadays. And it's the reason that Nike and Reebok and all these companies have shifted from padding everything in the feet now to providing shoes that are like this with a wider toe box, with very little padding actually, and that are getting back to, so that it feels more like you're walking barefoot actually, only you've got protection. And they have created very, very lightweight shoes nowadays that didn't exist just a few years ago. It's all because of that book. And it's medical anthropology. It's a personal story of overcoming an overuse injury, and it's the story of long-distance runners. And it's a great read. I mean, it's just a really exciting book. but it will change how you walk. And so, feet getting bigger. With 51% of your bones in your feet, every one of those bones has a little bit of cartilage between it. The bones don't grow, But as you start using parts of your body, the cartilages get stronger and they get a little thicker. They start to actually become healthy. And 51% of your bones means there's hundreds of little connections that are getting a little bit bigger. And over a long trail, my entire adult life, I was a 9.5 in shoes. And I got on the Pacific Crest Trail, and halfway through, I went and bought a new pair of shoes without checking out 9.5. I was dying, and they were just awful. I went back, and they said, well, did you measure your foot? And I said, no, I've always been a 9.5. They measured my foot, I was a 12. I am now a solid 12. When I rent shoes, 2.5 sizes bigger, and that's a permanent change. And every long-distance hiker I know has that experience. Hey, I bought, there's another long-distance hiker back there, PCT in the Continental Divide. And, but your feet grow, and it's a healthy growth. They grow wide, which is why these shoes have such a wide toe box, because you want that room to spread.
What kind of shoes are those?
Well, actually, I'll get into them later. I've got a pair here to show. These are, actually, they're Ultras. Ultra Lone Peaks over here. That is the most used shoe by long-distance hikers in America. It's becoming that way in Europe as well.
How would you say the name of that shoe again?
I'm sorry?
The name of the shoe again?
ALTRA. Ultra, and the model is Lone Peak. But Ultra is the company, ALTRA. And these are the Instincts, those are the Lone Peaks. They're not a shoe for everybody. And, you know, if you're a hiker that hikes in boots, boots are fantastic, but they have to be broken in. Seriously broken in. I mean, wear them for months before you attempt a long trail. Most of the blister injuries, and I'll get into blisters in a bit, most of the blister injuries happen because people would buy boots, walk around in them for a few days, and then go and attempt the Camino. You'll see boots hanging on the posts. You see them on trees. You see them everywhere. I didn't bump into anybody having blister issues who were wearing tennis shoes. So it's a choice. You know, I mean, boots do provide more support. They provide better traction underneath, but they also cripple people if you haven't broken them in. So if you're gonna hike in boots, wear them all the time beforehand for months, because they just take that long. A soft shoe like this doesn't take that long to break in, and it's very unusual to find people getting blisters in tennis shoes.
Is it Lone Peak or Long Peak?
Lone, L-O-N-E-P-E-A-K. And the other thing that's different about these shoes is they have what they call a zero-drop heel. Sure, well, actually, these haven't been used that much. But the heel of them is basically, I mean, there is no heel. And actually, I'll get into Gait at this point. Any other questions on overuse before I...
I want to add that a lot of women wear men's shoes.
Absolutely. To get a wide toe box, many women will buy men's shoes. And I know a lot of female friends that hike, and they always buy men's shoes. So, in whatever size fits them. The other thing is, when you buy shoes, get them a little bigger than you think you need.
Oh, a whole size at least.
A whole size. Half a size at least, or a whole size. I mean, like I say, I grew 2.5 sizes over 1,000 miles.
You can always have another pair of socks on.
Yeah.
You just take the socks off. Yeah.
That's right. Yes. I heard. The other thing different about these shoes is there is no heel. They're called a zero-drop heel. That is something that might take some getting used to. I had one friend that actually had some ankle issues come up. But this is a shoe that we've put people into on these long trails that are having real serious problems, and they just go in and they've never switched back. They're so comfortable. Yeah?
Do they come waterproof?
They do. There is a Lone Peak that's waterproof. Now, the issue with waterproof, and Katie, yeah, these are not, they're going around.
Right.
Katie loves waterproof shoes too. Be aware that if you like waterproof shoes and you wear them, air them out a lot more. It's really, I mean, you will have much more chance of getting athlete's foot and jungle rot and things like that because they just don't breathe. The beauty of these things, they're colder. I mean, Katie noticed we were on the mountain with these yesterday, that they're colder in a storm and when they're wet than a waterproof shoe, of course. But be aware that waterproof shoes don't dry out as easily and as quickly. So you're carrying around a lot of moisture. Okay, to gait. Gait is how we walk. And most Americans really stride out and it's boom, boom, heel toe, heel toe. And it's not, if you take off your shoes and walk barefoot in your house, that's not how you're walking. It hurts to come down on your heel. You feel it. It's not how we're made to walk. At least this is, according to Born to Run. And it really has helped me. It's the addition of the big padded heel that actually we have in modern shoes makes it possible to do that heel-toe stuff. We can walk, very easily that way over great distances. But what's happening on every single step, it's jam, 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 jam. Do that 1,000,000 times. The Camino is 1,000,000 steps. And you are jamming your ankle, your knee, and your hip in a way that you don't jam if you're walking barefoot, when you're basically keeping your feet underneath you. It's more of a shuffle. And you actually are falling on your heel, but on the side of your foot, which has a fat pad there. And the fat pad is actually the cushion. Across from that is your arch. If you have a big arch support in there, like this, the arch is just like an arch of a building. It holds weight. And this is our building arch. It takes the pressure of a person walking and cushions it like this. If you have that completely supported, it's a hard thing. It doesn't give the give that is actually built into us physically. But you land on the side of your foot, a little bit on the heel, and then roll onto your toes and off. And if you take long strides, you have to do a heel strike. If you take short strides, this is the other thing about overuse injuries, shorten your stride, and especially going over the Pyrenees. Take small steps all the way. And if you stride out, you're liable to get, groin issues, and it's the tremendous pressure of each step that exacerbates over weeks or months of walking. So that book basically taught me a different way of walking, which is more of a shuffle. And I go running around, but, I'm hitting, my heel is there, but I'm not doing this. It's not the big long step that I used to have. And I used to have a lot of knee issues. I run down Mount Diablo now. And I'm an old guy, and I don't have any knee issues at all. But I run down slowly with a kind of a shuffle as opposed to a big long stride like an Olympic runner might use.
Repeat where do you land with your foot?
Where I land, it's mainly keeping your feet directly under you. With a shorter stride, they're under you. And you're walking first. You're actually coming down on almost all of your foot.
Flat foot.
Yeah, it's like coming down on the flat foot, exactly. But you're kind of shuffling along with that, as opposed to banging down on your heel. And that's the difference. But it's more of a gentle, actually, it's learning how to walk gently. It's absolutely learning how to walk gently, and how to do that day after day. It's a different kind of a walk, because and especially with boots, you come out and it's kind of bang, 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 bang. The boot doesn't have a lot of rock to it or give. So if you are doing that, try to make shorter strides. Try to make it so it feels like you're walking gently. And actually, I learned all of that from a guy by the name of Bigfoot, who had been crippled on the Appalachian Trail. The guy had the hugest feet I've ever seen in my life. He was about that tall. And he had gone into a lot of stuff to get over his physical issues. He gives the overuse trainings for the Pacific Crest Trail kickoff every year. And he's a marvelous person. But he said, you've got to get into a shorter stride, a gentler way of walking, so that you're not jamming your body as you do it. Okay, and let's see. Sprained ankles. The only sprained ankle I saw was a guy in a big pair of boots walking on a Roman road. And a big pair of boots puts you up high because it's a pretty thick sole. It's pretty rigid. And when there's one section of Roman road that the cobbles are on end. And getting over that, it's like this. With a tennis shoe, you kind of just work it around, and your toes can feel it and all that stuff. He sprained his ankle bad, and I don't know whether he completed it or not. We don't know whether he did or not, because we never saw him again after that, but he went down hard.
Did you have a heavy pack too?
I'm sorry?
Did you have a heavy pack too?
I don't remember whether he did or not, but that really does, yeah, a heavy pack is, oh, it's just miserable. Don't do it. Carry as little as you can. And I'll get into some show and tell if we have time here. For blisters, the one main thing for blisters is if you, like I said, if you got boots, break them in big time. If you're getting blisters anyway, deal with them. Take off your shoes, wash your feet a couple times a day. You'll get to places where there's water. Change your socks and start to, treat them. And here, one of my favorite simple things, and you get it at Walmart's of all places, is NextCare. And it's a very, very thin bandage. It's almost like a second skin type bandage. You can get a whole pack of 50 for, I think it's $3.50 or something. It's very cheap. It's NextCare, Nexcare.
But there's a specific.
And they have big ones that are just the cellophane covering for the blister. If you start getting a blister and it hasn't popped, just leave it, put a cover on it, something to keep it clean and to pad it a little bit, moleskin, any of those things. In Europe, you easily will find Compeed. It's a little harder to find in America, but Compeed, and they are cushion bandages, and they're really nice, and they're expensive too. So I don't have any in here. And actually, I mean, the thing about blisters is if you walk ahead of time, your feet will be tough enough that you won't get blisters. I've had one blister in 10,000 miles. You don't need, and Katie got none on that hike. So walk ahead of time. But this is a larger one because we saw blisters that were so big. Oh my God. When your toes start rubbing, especially if your shoes are kind of small, if your feet are spreading and your boots are still a little small, you put this between just some type of body glide. There are many different products, but you can get in a little teeny thing like that. Put it on your finger, rub it between the toes, and it just makes them slide a little easier. But the beauty of these bandages is they stick. Now, the other thing that I watched happen one time, there was a gal, Sarah from Australia, wonderful young gal, who had a pair of boots. They were very expensive boots, like $250, And she had done the first 3 weeks, no problem. Well, at that point, her feet are starting to actually grow. We're not just talking about the daily swelling. They're actually growing, and they're getting bigger. And by, oh my gosh, 11 o'clock in the morning, we hiked with her a number of days. She was such a delight. But by 11 o'clock in the morning, she was really hobbling, and it was real hard for her to walk. And I could just see her feet were just squishing out of that boot. They were pressed against every edge of it. And we were in the middle of the Meseta in a place where there were no big towns. There was she was ready to get a new pair of shoes. And, but there was no place to do it. And I said, well, and she didn't want it. She was a purist. She was very, very Catholic. She wanted to do her Camino. She did not want to miss a step. And so she wouldn't take a bus, forward to Leon would be the place she could have probably bought shoes. And I said, well, something I've seen people do on the Pacific Crest Trail when they're in dire straits, you've got a couple hundred miles before you're going to get to another place, is and where it was squishing out her toes were just, too wide for the toe box that she had. I said, well, people sometimes will cut the side of their shoe away and go with it, and duct tape it over to keep rocks out. Well, $250 pair of boots. It was awful. But she couldn't walk, and she wasn't willing to bust forward. And she cut both sides of her shoe out. She made it all the way to Santiago with those boots. So that's something you can do if you're stuck. You don't have it. Modify your shoes to fit so that they actually work for you at that point. And she was such a great gal. Now, jungle rot and athlete's foot. Oh, question. I'm sorry.
Now, you talked about boots and you talked about these Nike Ultras.
Oh, they're not Nike, Ultra.
Ultra.
Yeah.
I mean,
They're trail runners.
Trail runners.
trail runners.
Yeah.
So do you really need to buy boots, or can you just wear shoes?
No,
Yeah.
I would, my recommendation to anybody walking that trail is to walk it in trail runners. Absolutely. It's not wilderness. It is not, it's an easy, lovely trail. You can do it. Susan, you go in trail runners? Yeah.
Trail
And yeah, iPod has done the entire Rocky Mountain chain in trail runners. And me too. This is actually what I hike. Well, there are lots of different types of trail runners. I mean, by all kinds of companies. And the thing you want to look for is a wide toe box, because your feet are going to spread. And to get them a little bigger, but everybody is different. These may not be the shoe for you. You know, there's all kinds of other ones. Try a number of different shoes. Go to REI or a reputable shoe store that will take them back. One of my very favorite people on the Pacific Crest Trail was an older gal. She was about 68 when I met her. Trail name was Amoeba. And I said, well, how do you get that name? You know, everybody has a different name. And she says, well, just watch me on trail. She would just kind of ooze up the trail. She was so gentle in the way she walked. She was walking the Pacific Crest Trail in Crocs. And I went, you know, I thought that was nuts. And then I talked to her. She had done the Appalachian Trail twice in Crocs.
Whoa.
She was phenomenal. And what had happened, she had taken off in boots when she was about 63 or 4, had gotten retired, taken off in boots. Within the first day, she was just crippled with blisters and sore feet. She hobbled back to the parking lot, got off trail, healed up, came back with tennis shoes, because she hobbled off in her tennis shoes. She comes back and puts on a pair of tennis shoes, goes a little ways into the woods, and same thing, the tennis shoes didn't do her well. She couldn't make it back. She puts on her Crocs that she had with her and walked back to the parking lot, and she said she felt great. Her feet felt fabulous. Well, she kept walking the Appalachian Trail. That's the hardest of the 3 great trails. That one is a killer physically. So the fact that she was able to do that in Crocs, and twice did it, in her late 60s, I mean, phenomenal. So you can hike these things any way you want. You don't need boots, in my opinion, for the Camino.
If I can press you on that point, pardon me, but my ankles roll very easily.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
So that would be, if you believe that the boots do you better,
all right.
then do that, absolutely. But what I have heard explained, and they actually talk about it in Born to Run, is that there's kind of a myth of ankle support from boots. If you have a ski boot on, your ankle is supported. It's rigid. But if you have a low top boot or even a high top boot, you can twist your ankle. We watched that guy go down on the section of Roman Road with boots on, and he got the worst sprained ankle I've ever seen. He could barely move. So you still are not really making that ankle rigid by wearing boots. And when you're lower to the ground, you're actually a little more stable than you are when you're up on a higher sole. I mean, just because when you're barefoot walking around, you can't roll an ankle barefoot, you know, or it's very, very difficult to do. Well, and just back to boots quickly. If you feel more comfortable in boots, just break them in. Boots are great. They absolutely are great. Just break them in well beforehand. Okay, back to blisters, just one thing quickly. If they do pop on you and you find yourself with an open blister, make sure you treat it as an open wound. We met people who were off trail for several weeks getting over systemic infections caused by blisters. And I know of one person in the Bay Area who lost his feet for blisters. I mean, because he didn't treat it. And that's a very, very serious thing. So treat them and then put on a pad. If you need to go see a doctor, they're all over. I mean, Spain has good, it's easy to find doctors and pharmacies that will help you out, absolutely. But don't ignore them. And the other thing that you can do, if you're getting blisters, tincture of benzoin is an old-timey medical thing. I get them in these little packs. I don't use them very often, but this is a very sticky compound that will toughen your skin wherever you use it. I've got one fellow training with me now who has climbed the highest 14 mountains in the world, all 7 of the 7 continents, and he's 68, phenomenal hiker. And he was telling me that before he goes on a big trek, he paints it on his hips, right here, where the hip belt. Often people will get blisters and rashes and whatnot from the hip belt there. You paint it on, let it sit for half an hour, maybe 45 minutes, and then wash it off. It's real sticky, and you're not going to want to put your clothes on it. He says, then just kind of wash it and leave it on for several days. But the washing takes the immediate stickiness away.
But he probably has a heavy pack because
he has a heavy pack, absolutely. You may not need that. But that's what you do on your feet. If you're getting blisters, paint that area with tincture of benzoin and let it dry a bit, and then put the bandage or the moleskin or whatever on top of that. It will glue the bandage to you in a way that makes it easy to remove, and it will toughen your skin. So tincture of benzoin, old timey thing. Yeah, pass that
Is
over.
it all brown? Is it like a brown?
It's a brown orange ointment, yeah, that goes on.
Tincture of benzoin.
Tincture of benzoin.
We can pass a few more this way.
Go in that direction. I'm sorry?
Is it a disinfectant as well?
It's a disinfectant as well. Absolutely.
No,
It will hurt on an open wound. You do it around the area. It will hurt on an open wound. Yes.
Just maybe mention that salt is your friend if you do have an open wound.
Salt is your friend. It hurts like heck.
But it is your
But it
friend.
is, absolutely. And
You know, we got that tincture in bottles and it was really heavy.
Yes.
I noticed you got it in packs. Where do you find those packs?
I got those online, Amazon.
Amazon.
Amazon.